everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Winging It Formula One podcast. I'm Freddie Coates. I'm going to be one of your hosts today, along with the indomitable Nigel Chu, who is my co-host. No third party today. Our usual trio of Nigel and Freddie and Adam is unable to happen because Adam is gallivanting around America. It looks absolutely fantastic. He's traveling to every city you can possibly name in the States. It looks brilliant. Before he's back in the UK in a few weeks' time, and we can then stop having to lose him on these podcasts. But let's get straight to it, Nigel. How do you find the Spanish Grand Prix? I thought it was really good.
I thought it was all right, yeah. Probably third best race, second or third best race of the season so far. I think it had a lot of hype building up to it, with the long run down to turn one, and we were all expecting another Leclerc versus Verstappen battle, but instead we just got loads of drama, loads of chaos, especially in the middle of the race. And yeah, I thought it was a fantastic race, really. So, and obviously it's a massive moment in the championship as well.
Yes, it was a massive moment for the championship. It felt like a sort of old school race where you had drivers spinning, you had drivers breaking down from the lead. That's something we don't really, I want to say, have the luxury of seeing these days, because they're all so good usually these days, so metronomic, so reliable. And you think back to 20 years ago and you just have gaps that were 20 seconds from 10 laps, whereas so which made Leclerc's gap that he had at the start and then to retire from it feel insane. But of course, that's where Max Verstappen came through to take victory, his second Spanish Grand Prix victory. It wasn't made easy for him, and he didn't make it easy for himself. But in the end, yeah, a completely deserved victory. What did you make of Max's weekend there, Nigel?
Yeah, I think he did sound rattled on the radio, but ultimately, I think what we saw, especially when he was fighting George Russell in the middle of the race, I think he did really well to stay composed in terms of his driving. Perhaps not what he was saying on the radio, but he didn't, do a silly dive bomb or do anything erratic. He was patient. And instead, it was Russell who was, quite aggressive, which was great to see. So I think perhaps a younger Verstappen may have got annoyed or frustrated or too frustrated at the situation, would have done something silly or made another mistake after his strange off at turn 4 because of the wind, he said. But yeah, instead he was patient. He did have a DRS problem and he managed to make the undercut work. He was the first driver to fully commit to a three-stop strategy. And I think that call was the golden call because he optimized the stint lengths. He kind of forced everyone else to almost follow his strategy, and because he was the first one to commit to it, Mercedes was kind of outfoxed in that way. And Verstappen, as he is, absolutely lightning quick on fresh rubber as well, so that was key. And I think he was just a little bit faster than teammate Sergio Perez, which in the end, Perez did let him through, but for me, Verstappen was a little bit quicker anyway. So yeah, not his best performance, but he definitely made it exciting. And I think he showed why he's a world champion with, staying composed, showing speed, and then getting the job done relatively easily in the end.
Yeah, I think that's very true. He did stay composed in his driving style in a way that he's been very, very good at throughout this season, actually, and is a marked improvement compared to his sort of desperate moves that came sort of commonplace for the majority of the 2021 season. I think it's very true to say about his stint lengths as well, and the way he optimized those, because he did a 20 lap, I think his third stint on soft tires, the undercut stint, was phenomenal. That's one of the best stints of the season on tire for me, because he just took those tires in extreme conditions with the heat to such a level and such pace and such length in that stint. That's the stint that won him the race, because it made the three-stop work, which meant that he was the preferred driver over Checo Perez, who they were trying to make the two-stop work. And yeah, admittedly, at the time, they didn't know whether the two-stop or the three-stop would work. Naturally, obviously, Perez became a 3-stop just by the circumstances of the race, giving him a crack at final lap and just making it easier just based on the pace Red Bull had. But they split their strategies and it worked really well. They split their strategies in the right way because of Verstappen's DRS problem, as you said. And I think it was very good. I think, yeah, it can be a bit kind of like, I completely get his frustration at the reliability. Like, oh, you can't even get DRS to work because there's been so much unreliability with Red Bull this whole season. At pretty much every race, there's been an issue. If you include AlphaTauri as well, and which you should for the power units. But it is a bit rich coming just after you've spun. So if you're a mechanic sat in the garage, you're probably going to be a bit like, come on, mate. We're not shouting at you. But anyway, I think he's earned that a bit from the rest of the drive.
Yeah, I know. I think every driver moans on the team leader, don't they? When things are not going the way. So, and I mean, those high pressure situations. Yeah, I didn't think much of it. I think it's just Verstappen being Verstappen, and for me, it's about the way he drove. When he drove, fantastically. So, yeah, people can complain about him moaning on the radio, but you tell me a driver who doesn't moan.
Exactly.
So,
yeah, exactly. And even though he did go around the houses in the first half of the race, he won it. So,
I mean, when was the last time a driver went off in the gravel? Won a race. I mean, I'm thinking Hamilton 2010 Belgian Grand Prix is the last one I can think of. I can't think of many others. Les Button 2011 Canada. Does that? Well, he didn't go off. He just hit everyone and drive through penalties.
Drive through penalties. I mean, he was last.
Yeah, so that as well.
Yeah, I think.
I can't think of any.
Oh, there were definitely some, but I can't really remember. I mean, if I had more time to think, I would come up with something. But I'm not going to waste this podcast. I'm not going to make everyone sit in silence while I try and think of a race from 2016.
Let us know if you can think of something more recent.
Yes, look at that content. Something will come to us tomorrow morning and be like, oh, now we look like idiots. But anyway, but yeah, moving on from Max to Charles Leclerc, who I think it's safe to say had that race nailed because his pace was brilliant. It was phenomenal. His first stint on soft tires, even without before Verstappen spun away, whenever that was, sort of 10 laps in, he had pulled away and he had it covered. I think he could have done more if he needed to. He made those tires last so long in that first stint while it was all kicking off behind him. He was able to just keep the lead. And, really a real shame for him because that was probably the first race this year that Ferrari have needed to win because they've obviously lost both championship leads.
Yeah, it's the worst way to lose a race when you've got the fastest car, which I think Ferrari had on Sunday. When you've got a big 10-second lead, which is what Leclerc had, it's just for the suspected turbo or MGUH problem to occur. It is just the worst way to lose. So it's desperately it's not unlucky because the team should have this thing shouldn't be happening, but it's just gutting for him because he could have had a 25-point lead at least, and instead he's 6 points behind. So it's a massive swing. Think about the swings that we saw last year in 2021 with Hamilton and Verstappen. These swings, they will come back to bite you, and the momentum now is well and truly with Verstappen and Red Bull because Ferrari have missed this chance to kind of hit back because they did have the fastest car and they didn't win. So yeah, tricky one. But I do think Leclerc, after the race, he was very composed, cool, calm, and collected. He didn't make too much of a fuss about it. I think he understands that these kind of things happen. That's good to see. Yeah, and I think he'll definitely bounce back and stuff like that. It's just whether this is the start of a few niggles for Ferrari, or is it a one-off problem, perhaps?
Yeah, they at least have the luxury of it potentially being a one-off problem, which Red Bull don't. But do you think this is there's sort of elements this season we've already discussed about sort of the inherent differences between the Red Bull and Ferrari car? Do you think this will hold Ferrari back in terms of the way they're going to then develop and go ahead with the course of the season?
Possibly, definitely in terms of the engine, because you can still make reliability upgrades. But I mean, look, this is only the second race Leclerc has used this engine as well. So if he doesn't have to change parts, was Verstappen, he's still on his first engine, isn't he? So will it change things? Probably not, because they'll be still bringing floor and aerodynamic upgrades and that kind of thing. So I don't think he'll change the plan in terms of that, because I think the upgrades they did bring worked. It's just they had this other power unit problem which they didn't see coming. So yeah, I don't think it'll change the development plans too much.
I've got another hard question to throw at you. And linking this to something we probably should talk about further down the line, but while we're on Ferrari, Carlos Sainz's pace, even after he had spun and had way after that when he was on the sort of correct strategy and so on, later on, was abysmal. And the fact that he was caught by Hamilton proved that, and he only got fourth because of Merc issues, which we'll get onto later. We'll talk about Mercedes, obviously. But do you think that's just about a pure Sainz to Leclerc gulf, or do you think that's a latter testament that maybe is showing Ferrari to be in a bit of a weird position as well?
I think Ferrari had the fastest car. I'm not sure why Sainz was so slow. I don't know if he had damage because he went through the gravel, or no, Verstappen didn't seem to have damage when he went through the gravel. But I think Sainz just had a poor weekend. I mean, he had 2 runs in Q3 when Verstappen and Leclerc only had 1 because of their various issues, and Sainz was still third. And then he had his bad getaway, and they just had no pace at all. So for me, I think it's just Sainz having a poor weekend, and Leclerc. I think if Leclerc was in the race, he would have, blitzed it. So yeah, I don't think Ferrari should be too concerned about not having pace, but I think Carlos Sainz should be worried that he's not at one with the car and he's not confident. Which going into Monaco as well, that could be a massive problem for him. So yeah, for me, I think it's just at the moment there seems to be, I don't know, 3 or 4 attempts between Sainz and Leclerc.
I think that's the worry. I think that is a worry from both sides, but it definitely is actually. It's not a should be worry. That definitely is a worry from Ferrari and from Sainz. So it'd be, I don't think it's exposing him this year. I think it's like you say, he's uncomfortable. He's not got the continuity with it. He definitely missed out on a month of race distances, which also didn't help him. And he's been very open about the fact that he's been not enjoying driving these porpoising stiff cars that when you hit a curb you feel it in your back. So which makes complete sense. The Ferrari still porpoises quite aggressively even through sort of corners and stuff. So yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see how that develops with Carlos Sainz and how that sort of relationship with the team develops, because
it just shows the styles, how much driving style and how tiny margins within the car. It makes a massive difference. We've seen with Ricardo, which we've talked about a lot over the last 18 months or so, and now Sainz could be in a similar position. Yet Sainz was seen as many, not by me, many by like a top 5 driver last year or top 4 driver.
Yeah.
But now, he's not looking too great, and getting that confidence back is really tricky in F1, which is why people like Lewis Hamilton, for example, for him to always get back on track, when he's struggling or had a bad weekend, he always comes back. So that is the difference, between the good and the great kind of thing. And Sainz at the moment, it seems to be struggling with that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think he's having the opposite of a purple patch, which seems to be ongoing, which is a bit. I thought this one would be the one it wasn't ongoing. Anyway, moving on from Sainz back to the podium to George Russell, who I think was probably one of the best drivers out there that on Sunday. I think that was a really, really, really accomplished drive, and exactly why he's got that Merc seat, because he didn't roll over. Yeah, he didn't have the pace, and yeah, it was really difficult for him to be there, and he had to kind of just play the game, and which is fine. But he didn't look out of place leading that race.
Yeah, he's driving so well. He's had a fantastic start to the season. Still kept on that top 5 record, and in some ways, with him only being 34 points off the championship lead, I think he's still in the title race if Mercedes can get their act together. I don't think he showed enough in Spain that it can be, but with his consistency in the way, if he just keeps maximising everything, a bit like the way Fernando Alonso did in 2012 when he nearly won the title. If he can just do something like that, that'll be absolutely outstanding. And we talked before the start of the season how when a driver joins a team, we know they can be a future world champion if they hit the ground running, and they're doing great immediately. And that's exactly what Russell has done. Yes, he's had a bit of luck with a couple of safety cars and stuff like that in Miami and Australia, but like that the weekend, yes, Hamilton had his incident, but Russell was still fantastic. And for him to get his elbows out against Verstappen, we've not seen them fight too much, showing his racecraft there. So that's just another skill that he has in his locker. So he's just doing all of the right things. And you know, I can't. It looks like he can probably continue this form for, well, perhaps for the rest of the season. I don't see any reason why not. He's just driving, fantastically. So if he can keep that up, then he could be the driver of the season.
Oh yeah, I mean, in 2017 and 2018, I seem to remember Max Verstappen saying in an interview somewhere, "Oh, you can't call an overtake on Bottas the best overtake in the season." And I think just in this race alone, you can consider George Russell as a genuine competitor in the way that I think a lot of drivers would have raced against Bottas and thought, "Oh, I've got this in the bag." I think they were worried to be having to overtake George Russell if the time comes based on his performance in this race. I was really impressed with it, and dear viewer or listener, I was watching this race with Nigel, and he turned to me and said, "Yeah, unfortunately, he was very loud." He turned to me and said, "If he wins this, it'll be the greatest win I've ever seen." And that was I don't know, he'd been leading for what, about 8 laps or so at that point, I'd say, holding off Verstappen. And it did genuinely feel like the race bin was on the cards because the strategies were lining up. You had no idea what was going to play out. Everything was on the fly strategically. There was no plan. And, I think both of us thought he could win that race.
Yeah.
At that point in that race.
When he got in the lead, after Leclerc retired, I did think if he can sort of defend for the next 35 laps, then but it was always going to be. I mean, it's the two Red Bulls versus one Merc thing, isn't it? That's what caught him out, and there's absolutely nothing he could do about it. He couldn't cover both of Perez and Verstappen off. That's why the Red Bull strategy team, to pull Verstappen in and then free up Perez to attack Russell, which he did, and then overtook him. That was perfect. But for Russell to even be in that position to have a chance of winning that after 30 laps, that is a fantastic moment, and he's definitely going to get many more chances to win this year. And I think, and I'm quite sure that he's going to take them too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And in comparison to George Russell, we had not, he had also had a very good drive from Lewis Hamilton. Like, it's not really, the comparison is that they were both very good. And George had the handle in qualifying, but then Lewis obviously looked to be able to be there in the race because of the Merc pace, but then had a whole different storyline, which involved essentially a last to question mark challenge, second last because Magnussen was behind him, but after that incident on lap 1,
which was a racing incident.
Yes, it was a racing incident. That's actually fact. You're not allowed to have an opinion on that one. It's just the most obvious sort of change direction of two drivers in sort of the most minute way, causing a very irritating impact that was surprisingly a puncture, to be honest, I thought. But anyway, Lewis then worked his way up through the field. He had a moment where his head dropped, but once he got it down, got that motivation that he could get the points, he worked at it, and the pace just kept coming for him. And at points, he was the fastest on track. Admittedly, it was a very weird strategic race, but to be the fastest on track, particularly when he was sort of scything through the midfield rather than just out the back of the entire field, was really actually impressive, even for Lewis Hamilton, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely outstanding drive, I thought, to come back like that. He effectively did a 2-stop strategy after he changed his after he sorted out his puncher from lap 1. So he effectively did a 2-stop strategy over 66 laps, which on that track, when you're coming through the field in dirty air most of the time, I think that was fantastic the way he kept the tyres up, kept the tyres alive, just as he's done for so many years now. Probably his best performance of the year so far, I think, to do that comeback, because he was very unfortunate that he had that puncher. It wasn't his fault. So
he basically undercut and overcut 3/4 of the grid just by just driving so well, and
he just magically appeared. Like, we didn't see many actual overtakes. It's just his tyre management to jump everyone while they were pitching was just outstanding.
And you've got to give a lot of credit to the Merc strategy team for just being able to see that, because I think that was one of the hardest races to see strategy and to see an end goal in a long time. And for the Merc strategists to have to do that, not just with sort of the 4 cars who are sort of battling around in pace, maybe the 2 ahead, 2 behind, but with probably really with at least sort of 15 cars, to sort of see that in such a lengthy way was, I think, is very impressive. The more you look back in hindsight, the more impressive it is, even at the time.
Yeah, I mean, Sainz, after he spun at turn 4, I think he emerged in 11th, and Hamilton was still pretty much at the back, a minute behind, and then Hamilton ended up only 40 odd seconds behind at the flag. Yes, you can take off 10 seconds because Leclerc went off and stuff like that. But to beat Sainz, well, he didn't beat Sainz because they're cool, but he
beat Sainz. Theoretically, on sort of in the race, he beat Sainz, but in the car race, he didn't beat Sainz. Yeah. But yeah, I think
to effectively beat Sainz was just amazing. I don't think anyone would have thought Mercedes could beat a Ferrari from being 9 places behind after lap 12 or whatever. So yeah, it was a fantastic drive.
I think the point that kind of stood out for me was when Sainz was closing on Bottas, who had been running a very good race as well, as he's just been. There seems to be usually a midfield driver who seems to be just a bit detached, sort of the P7 person, and that seems to be Valtteri Bottas this year, and that's very impressive. But anyway, when Sainz was closing on him, and you're kind of thinking, oh yeah, Hamilton's probably also going to close on Bottas, but in the time it took for Sainz to close on Bottas, Hamilton had closed on Sainz, and it's like, whoa, where's that come from? That was an insane stint that didn't make any sense to me, and I was very impressed with it. And we lauded Verstappen's tyre management and randomly very quick stints that he just was able to pull out when it was necessary at the start of this podcast. Feels like Lewis Hamilton was the other driver who had the kind of opportunity to show that, and he did that. So impressive stuff. It would have been lovely to have seen him at the front of the race, but I don't know where he would have ended up. I think it would have been relatively similar to George, but just based on that pace, I don't think there was any reason for him to be ahead or behind George significantly on track. It just probably would have made the Red Bull win that bit harder because it's another Merc in the way. As you'd
lose out. And he was also on the medium tyre as well, so it was a shame that we kind of lost that aspect of.
Of course, yes.
Doing like a 25, 30 lap stint or something, and then being dead fast at the end instead, or something like that. So it's a shame we lost that aspect as well. Anyone who thought Lewis Hamilton is going to be down or rubbish for the rest of the season should think again.
So where do we think Merc are for the rest of the season based on that? I mean, you said earlier that you think maybe there's a little bit still left to be desired just on the terms of pace, but on sort of the raw pace, do you think they're still about half a second off, would you say? If a quality...
Yeah, I think so. I think about half a second is fair. I think what they have now is they've sorted the porpoising enough that they've kind of got a baseline, whereas Red Bull and Ferrari have had this baseline for four or five races. So now they can really kind of fine-tune things with setup, tyres, bring more upgrades, of course.
Do you think they'll have some upgrades that they would have pre-planned pre-season for sort of Saudi and Australia, maybe, that they can now put on the car that they wouldn't have had, that probably would work?
Yeah, I think so. I think, around Canada or Baku, we could see some big upgrades from Mercedes, and that could bring them right back into play. I think Monaco will be a slight struggle for them, but I think they'll definitely win races. And I think they've just about shown enough for Russell to still be kind of in the title race. But the constructors is going to be very difficult. I think for Hamilton as well, he would have to go on to some kind of steamroll in the second half of the season. But I think Russell's consistency, the way both of them are driving, and I think the car is in a good enough place to kind of just hang in there. And if they can get the development right, because I think development is still going to be absolutely huge in the coming races, I think they're still just about in it.
I completely agree with that. I think Russell's gap is actually pretty good.
It's not a lot at all.
It's really quite handy, and I think there's no reason to suggest that instance won't strike and that reliability won't strike, particularly on the Red Bull side. They've lost definite. Both Red Bull and Ferrari have lost wins now because of reliability. I think you could really easily say close to wins, because I think we don't know what Max would have done from a safety car restart in Bahrain. So that's going to be really interesting to see how Merck can sort of wiggle their way into this. It could be make or break these next few races, and that's really interesting to see.
If Russell could have a 2012 Alonso-esque season, he can win the championship. I'm quite sure. If he can replicate that, which is a massive ask, by the way, but if he can do it, he can win this title.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's really exciting now. I think I'm really happy Merck are back in the fight, just because I think you can all see easily just the spin it put on the sort of strategic battle in that race with just extra elements to it in a way that you didn't really expect to see. And I think that's going to be the storyline of Monaco. I think that's going to be definitely the storyline of Baku after that, because Baku's so weird. And then we've got some races that really we kind of feel like everyone, based on this race, everyone should be pretty similar, I think you could say.
I think so. Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to the rest of Formula One in 2022. So now we got so that's the sort of the top six done, which we haven't really been able to say since 2019, and we didn't have a podcast then, so we haven't been able to say. Actually, I don't know. I think we assumed Ferrari would be up there when we did our preview episode in COVID 2020 times.
We did.
Which is, I think, a fair enough thing to assume. But anyway, moving back to the midfield, and there are some pretty stunning drives in the midfield. There are also some pretty kind of unstunning stuff as well, in my opinion. But yeah, I think shout out Fernando Alonso, the P20 to P9, with what he had underneath him in terms of a car that could only qualify 17th, admittedly without a second run in Q1, a final run, I should say. It was a really good pace to get up there. I think the Alpine race pace is really phenomenal. And I think they were just basically doing a carbon copy of the Merck strategy, which was just kind of just overcut and undercut as many people as possible. And it worked.
It was very strange in a way, because on Saturday after qualifying, the Alpine garage and atmosphere must have been absolutely gutted, and with Luca De Meo and all the big bosses there, it must have been a bit kind of tense as well, because to get Alonso on home soil to be knocked out of Q1 is nearly embarrassing almost, because it shouldn't have happened. He had the pace to get through, and they made errors with where he came out on his outlap and that kind of thing, and what the stuff he was told. So it should have happened, but he recovered well to get 9. I think, like you said, Freddie, Alpine's race pace, almost from nowhere, because I didn't really expect it, was probably 4th best car on Sunday, and that was enough for Alonso to get 9th and Ocon to finishing in 7th. So yeah, they should be pleased that they do have the pace, because tyre management or tyre wear has been a big problem for them in the first 4 or 5 races, but it seems like they've kind of sorted that out in Spain because that's a very high abrasive track, and they had some of the best tyre wear from the whole field, so that's a massive plus. They just got to make sure that these operational errors don't kick in.
Yeah, it was a similar story actually that kind of went a bit unnoticed by Sebastian Vettel in a slightly worse car, I think, in the Aston Martin. He was 11th and was flirting with the points for quite a lot of the race as well. And he started like 16th or 17th or something like. He started way back as well. So there was a similar drive there that went pretty well. So I mean, it's what you expect when it comes to sort of controlling tires and weird conditions from these guys, but they did a very good job. Another driver who did a very good job in probably what I think he's going to remember as the worst Grand Prix he's ever had to feel in, which was Lando Norris, who he's had kind of really sort of flaring up hay fever all weekend, and in the heat that was 37 degrees in Spain, in a very sort of springy part of the world that it's just boiling. He also had tonsillitis, and he was sick apparently on the grid just before he got in the car, which I think the only other time that's ever happened was in the film Rush. And yeah, he drove a really good race. He was up there fighting with Ocon and for 7th place for pretty much the whole thing. So really good job.
He was much faster than Daniel Ricciardo as well. For Ricciardo, I mean, we have to give credit to Norris, of course, but for Ricciardo to be on average about half a second slower in the race and against an ill Norris, let's say, if not a bit more, is really not good. Ricciardo's been not great for the last 15 months, but this was one of his worst performances, I think, because Norris wasn't at his best yet, still finished quite a bit ahead. So, I think it's very brave from Norris to kind of race because he wasn't there for the national anthems, I don't think. So they were probably considering if he should even race at all or if he should pull out. But he did race. Adrenaline helped, I'm sure.
I'm sure.
And yeah, just showing a bit of character, personality to persevere with it in a hot race like that and to finish in the points is a fantastic achievement. So yeah, hope he gets better soon because it doesn't sound too good, but for a drive like that, absolutely fantastic.
Oh yeah, and at the end of the day, it wasn't as bad as Mark Webber and Fuji in 2007. If you know, you know. If you don't know, you probably have guessed. But yeah, Nigel, you want to move on to a team that's what's the word? Peaky. Haas.
Well, I said this after Miami as well. They cannot get the strategy right. I don't know what it is, but on Sunday, Mick Schumacher, I think he drove all right as well, to be fair. I don't think he did too
He kept
bad.
getting overtaken, though.
That's because of the strategy he was given.
Okay.
So he pitted on the same lap as Ricciardo, like he was behind Ricciardo. So they pitted on the same lap, so they had to follow him. He eventually overtook him because Ricciardo was driving so slowly. But then they decided to do a 2-stop, making the second and final stop on lap 30. So he went from lap 30 all the way to the end on mediums. It was just a sitting duck against the likes of, I think, Gasly, Alonso, and Vettel. And yeah, he couldn't do anything because trying to do 36 laps on medium tyres in a hot race like that is very tricky, and especially for Schumacher, it's only his second year in the Haas tyre wear. I'm not too sure about, but I don't know why they committed him to that strategy because I think the Haas had the pace to get points, and with Magnussen, with his unfortunate silly incident as well, he couldn't show anything. But they've got to get the strategy right. It's so important when the margins are so close in the midfield. It just seemed a bit clueless almost, and it's happened too many times with Haas, and yeah, it just happened again.
Yeah, they were one of the few teams who haven't really upgraded their car yet qualified very well, so they understand the pace in the car, but it's utilizing that pace in a consistent way across a race that's letting them down. And we've been there before with Haas 2018, 2019. So
Gunter Steiner even admitted in the kind of press release thing they put out on Sunday night that the strategy wasn't the best, let's say, and that they had to look back and see what went wrong. So when someone says that in a press release, you kind of know that someone made a mistake there. So yeah,
and Mick's under pressure at the moment, and as well because his pace has rightly raised eyebrows and questions.
I don't think he's been too bad in the last two races. I think he's been all right.
I think he was very good in Miami. I think he was. I mean, he could have been. I think he could have been better in Spain. To be fair, but I think Haas need to be giving him the opportunities on their side as well.
Yeah.
And
I think it's much more on Haas for me.
Yeah.
Than Schumacher, a lot more.
In Miami, they did that, and for the majority of the race, he successfully paid them back. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes because they historically can do it. So let's hope they learn from this because there has been one of the crazy stories at the start of the season. Let's hope they can continue to be a crazy story of the second half of the season. Another debate that sort of arose in that Grand Prix I think Nigel will think this as well, maybe being blown a bit out of proportion, is the Red Bull team orders kind of, I don't know, debate. It's not a debate. The Red Bull team orders that happened. And what basically happened was Sergio Perez was asked to move aside twice for Max Verstappen, and Max Verstappen wasn't moved aside for Sergio Perez when Perez was in a better position. And arguably Perez, when he was leading the Grand Prix this early in the championship, shouldn't have been moved aside, depending on what people think. But he would have been passed by Verstappen anyway. And Red Bull have been there 2013 Malaysia, where Red Mist descends on drivers in second place. And that caused arguably the worst PR for them in a long time. So before probably 2021, it was still probably the biggest crisis for that team. So I think that those scars ring true for Red Bull. But Nigel, this isn't a loaded build up to a question. What do you make of all of that?
Well, I think it's more stupid if they didn't do the team orders at the end, because Verstappen was on fresher tyres. He's going to be in the championship lead. He was a faster driver. Why would he not do it? I think it's stupid from a team if you don't do it, personally. So that's what I make of it. The first time, you could say Perez should have been given kind of more time. But again, Verstappen caught up very quickly and Perez wasn't able to do much about Russell. And then in terms of Perez not being allowed through, well, it wasn't exactly on the back of Verstappen like Verstappen was behind Perez. He was over a second behind. It wasn't even within the RS range. So, and then Red Bull made the clever move anyway to pit Verstappen, and that freed Perez up anyway. And then he overtook Russell. So, I don't know. Perez thinks he could have won if he did the free stop strategy, but at the time it wasn't very clear which strategy was best. I just think Verstappen was a little bit faster than Perez. So I think the right person won, kind of thing. But equally, you have to praise Perez for playing the team game and moving over on two different occasions, because some drivers would do it, some wouldn't. But for Perez to do it as soon as the team asked, I think that deserves quite a lot of praise. I don't think there's too much of a debate for me. I think in that situation, Red Bull did the right thing.
Yeah, I think Red Bull did the right thing throughout in terms of the decisions. They were the correct decisions. I think from one side of it, I'd have liked to have just seen a fight. I think it would have been quite fun. I do think the Malaysia 2013 that I mentioned was the best racing of 2013 between the Red Bull teammates. And I think that would have been quite cool to see if Perez, Verstappen has such a pace advantage, but if Perez could have been a bit canny and maybe, I don't know, done some DRS little tricks and stuff, maybe it would have been a bit of fun, but I don't think it.
Yeah, well, Verstappen didn't have DRS, did he? So it would have been very fun.
Yeah, it probably would have been very interesting. So I was a bit like, I wanted to see that, but I really wouldn't have made that decision myself if I were that team.
I mean, from Red Bull's point of view, with
No
Leclerc
brainer.
out, they had to inflict the most damage possible, and they did that with a 1-2, just like they did in Imola when Leclerc had his mistake and Sainz was out of the race. They did the most damage possible by getting a 1-2. So, capitalising on mistakes from Ferrari and capitalising on mistakes from anyone. That's what Red Bull have been so good at, not just this year, but I'd say the last 6 or 7 years since the turbo hybrid era started. When Mercedes kind of faltered in 2014, it was always Daniel Ricciardo who was there in 2016 as well. So
with one driver they have been. I think you can't. I don't know if you can make that argument when you've got the Albon and Gasly scenarios in recent history. But I think you're right to say that in terms of Red Bull are the piece picker-uppers of Formula One in the past few years. That is very true. I think also to your point that Perez saying that he thinks he could have won if he'd been on the 3-stop. At the time, you wouldn't have known, and that's fine because like we've said a few times that the strategy was so sort of difficult to call in this race that it was the right thing to do to keep Perez on the strategy that they were planning with a longer strategy because he wasn't compromised with the DRS. It was better to put Verstappen in a tyre offset position because that was more required for Verstappen to be racier than Perez. So circumstance of Verstappen's DRS failures were aiding his strategy being in that strategy. So I think.
But he was also faster.
Yes, he was faster. I think we're right to praise everything about Red Bull in that scenario. I think maybe they could have given Perez one more go in the first instance against Russell and Verstappen just close because that was pretty much a straightaway get out of the way. Whereas, they just, I don't know. That's the only thing I would say. But I mean, it worked out, so it's fine.
Some people just like to have a dig at Red Bull, don't
they? Yeah. Which again is arguably fair enough.
That's what fans are for.
Yes, these days. But also, what fans are for is making an environment, getting a good experience, and for playing the Formula One too. Yeah, that makes sense. And unfortunately, the fan experience at the Spanish Grand Prix wasn't great from what we've heard. Obviously, we weren't there. We were in sunny Sheffield.
I was there about a month ago.
Yeah, he was there.
When it was raining.
2 years ago. But yeah, apparently it was just horrific for the number of fans there. It's probably the busiest weekend Spain has had at Catalonia for Formula One in a long time, but I think they still do numbers for MotoGP there. So I'm a bit shocked that they know how to run an event at that racetrack. And yet apparently they ran out of water at midday. And then you couldn't take the water you had into grandstands in a 37-degree outdoor event. That's not on. And then if you got like 2 people just for some reason checking tickets on the way out, and I know this because I know Formula One tickets aren't 3-day tickets. You get a Saturday and Sunday and a Friday ticket entry. So that's unnecessary unless it's like 2 p.m, unless someone asks specifically. If you're walking out, you're walking out because the Formula 2 is finished. But anyway, I think, Formula One have interestingly issued a statement saying we expect the promoters to do better. Very quickly, they issued that statement. So it'll be interesting to see that because fan experience is definitely something they're throwing at the forefront. I think particularly with the French Grand Prix that was very poor a few years ago in terms of fan experience with people missing sessions because of just queues. I think, I basically the reason I'm bringing this up is because yes, it's an awful experience, but also I want to sort of commend Formula One for being so quick to damning it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think F1 have done the right thing. It's now up to the track organisers and the event organisers to sort it out for next year to ensure that it doesn't happen again, because it is a little strange that it hasn't been this bad in the past and now it's suddenly come back. Maybe it's because it's coming back to almost fully normal now and that kind of thing. But yeah, the fans can't be treated as they were. I mean, it must have been a horrible experience to be paying hundreds of euros and pounds to not have water and sit in baking hot sun. Yes, you get to watch F1, but I was certainly wouldn't like that.
I don't think it'd be worth.
I'd want something back. So yeah, it's got to be sorted out for next year. And if it isn't, and if this happens again, then I mean, F1 should consider, about having a Spanish Grand Prix at the Circuit de Castle near Barcelona, because fans cannot be treated like this.
Yeah, and I think that would genuinely be considered. I think it's, like you say, they can't be treated like this. But going from fan experience, somewhere where you definitely get a expensive experience as a fan is Monaco, and
another place you've been to.
Another place I've been to. What took us by surprise is that this is a double header, and actually there's a race week this week, and there's a race this weekend, and it's the Monaco Grand Prix. I thought it was like ages away, but anyway. So now we're going to do a few minutes on Monaco. But yeah,
we don't have time to do a proper episode. Sorry about that.
No, which is fair enough because we are third-year uni students. But anyway, Monaco, baby, yeah. What to say about Monaco? Nigel, how do you think 2022 Formula One will settle into Monaco, into the Principality?
Well, I think it'll be like previous years at Monaco. I think there's always a debate about, should it be on the calendar, should it not? And I remember all three of us, me, Adam, and you, Freddie, agreed last year that it should be on the calendar because of qualifying, because it's all about that 1 or 2 laps in Q3, getting close to the barriers, not making a mistake like Charles Leclerc did last year.
Yeah.
Putting it all on the line for the Sunday. Yes, the race can be a bit boring, but there's still that strategic aspect. There's still that strategic aspect of, can you do an overcut, an undercut? I mean, the overcut works really well sometimes.
Yeah.
Especially if the conditions are cool, which I'm not sure about this weekend. I presume it's going to be quite warm, but
there's a thunderstorm.
There's a thunderstorm. So then you got rain as well. So it's just different. It's just different. I mean, not every race can be exciting. And yes, there haven't been too many exciting Monaco Grand Prix, but there's definitely
been a lot of non-exciting Monaco Grand Prix.
Yeah,
I'm keen to point out a few times. I think I said this last year when we spoke about this that you just brought up. But Monaco 2019, really interesting race. Monaco 2018, really interesting race. 2017, a bit dull. 2016, one of the classics of that season. 2015, really interesting race. 2014, quite good for just dual Bianchi, to be honest. It was a weird race. Then you go back, 2011 Monaco Grand Prix, one of my favorite Formula One races.
Yeah.
And that's like 40 years after the cars have outgrown that circuit. So I think really in recent history, the proportion of good races that are really enjoyable to watch and bad races at Monaco is arguably better than quite a few other tracks. I think it's better than Spa, which is mad.
Yeah, I think Monaco, it has these moments that it produces, with 92 Senna versus Mansell.
That was actually overrated.
Well, maybe, yeah, but it's still like a famous
You're
moment.
Right.
Even 2015, the moment with Hamilton's pit stop,
Yeah.
and then couldn't get past Vettel and Rosberg ended up winning. So I think there's lots of moments at Monaco. You might not get great racing, but you'll definitely get some kind of drama on the Saturday or Sunday or both, perhaps. And qualifying there, it's probably the best qualifying of the year, along with maybe Suzuka or Singapore. It's just fantastic. See the cars, gliding through the walls and drivers. That is a proper driver's track, and the way they have to build up into it through practice on Friday and Saturday, it's just fantastic. So I think it should stay on the calendar, and I think this weekend, considering what we've just seen in Spain, we're going to get a bit more drama. And if we do get Verstappen and Leclerc going at it on Sunday over 78 laps, bring it on.
Yeah, I completely agree. Bring it on. Do you have any idea of what form's going to be like in Monaco?
On paper, Ferrari should be better
I
because
agree.
the slow speed corners, the mechanical grip of the Ferrari, excuse me, they should be better than Red Bull, but equally Verstappen on street circuits, he always seems to be a little bit more ahead of his teammates. Some people call Verstappen a street fighter because he's so good on street tracks. So if he can be second, if he can line up second ahead of Sainz, let's presume Leclerc gets pole, which I think he will, then the Red Bull race pace might be able to turn things around. And Mercedes, it probably won't be as close, but I think they'll be there. They'll have enough pace to capitalise on any incidents or mistakes. So yeah, I think it'll be an exciting weekend.
I think Mercedes will be fast enough to be a strategic quandary, but
yeah.
not
So
necessarily
if they're within the 20 seconds, then it'll be a problem. Yeah,
that's what I think will be the case. I do think the Merc is actually pretty good in some of the slow speeds at some tracks. It's been pretty good, but arguably a lot of their speed also is medium to high speed as well. Yeah. So it's a bit of a hard.
That's what I think. I think that's in the medium high speed corners.
Yeah, it's a hard one for them, but we don't know what they will be able to re-unlock from their car. But it's Monaco. I think I completely agree with you. The Leclerc, Verstappen, Sainz is kind of our go-to order for this kind of season.
Yeah.
But I think it's the most confident I've been of a prediction for a top three in a long time. And I think I'm not even going to ask you. So I think, we're just going to have to say ta-ta for now. See you guys again for the Monaco Grand Prix review, and where we might be eating humble pie or we might be saying told you so. So keep safe, stay excellent, have a good one, and enjoy yourselves. Goodbye, everybody.
Have a good week.